In this video, we can start our platform, but we can't really reverse it or stop it. And maybe I want to be able to toggle whether or not the platform is moving, and we can kind of do it, but it's a bit buggy. Additionally, we have broken our light, which I didn't really notice in the last video, so we're going to fix that real quick. The bug is just this set active right here. What we really wanted was we wanted to turn on and off the visibility, not the active. Set visibility there. Just replace that node, make sure you reconnect it up. Make sure you do the same thing down here. Make sure you set the new visibility to be off, new visibility to be on. Connect that back in there. Connect this over here. Okay, so now our light should work. Let's test that real quick. Compile, save. Okay, so now we want the platform to move according to our light. And if all you wanted to do was start the platform and then it just goes and you don't want an option to disable it, then this code right here may be all you need. But if we wanted to create something a little more complex where we can start an animation and stop an animation, then we may want the ability to toggle it. So the first thing I'm going to do is look over here and think about what we want to do. Well, we have our start movement and we say, okay, play and then reverse, but we want to be able to tell it to stop. And right now we don't really have a representation of that, but we do have a node in our animator. So if we create a new custom event, call that stop movement, and we plug that into stop, let's see what happens. Actually, we need to actually call the function in our level blueprint. We're going to toggle it on to start movement, and then we need to make sure that we toggle it off, which I'm just going to copy this same reference, which again is this same platform over there. And we're going to tell that particular platform to stop movement. It's going to be another little tricky bug here, which we'll see in a second. I hit compile and save, and we minimize, hit play. Okay. Come over here. Now, technically it's starting and stopping, right? So we may think that we're done, but when it goes in the reverse direction, you see what's happening? We're telling it to start movement, stop, and what we want to do is say continue movement, right? We want to resume the movement. The problem is whenever we're calling start, right here, we're saying play, which play always assumes forward direction. What we want to do is infer resume movement. And in order to do that, we may want to determine what is the current direction of the timeline. If we can do that, then we could say determine the current direction of the timeline and then continue in that direction. So there's a few different ways to do this, but since I haven't really used Booleans very much so far, I want to show you one way you could do it. Since we know that we just want to move forward or back, I think that this is the easiest way to do it. You may think that you could pull off of component animate over here. Technically, you can get something called is reversing. Right. The problem with this is only going to give you whether it is reversing and in motion. Whereas what we want to do is say, okay, we're not in motion yet. We want to decide which way to go, then do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new Boolean here, and I'm just going to call it is reversing. I want to keep track of this myself. So make a new variable, call this is reversing, like that. I don't really need the designer to see that. That's going to be buried here, and I really don't want to confuse them, so they don't need to see it, so I'm not going to let them. And we need to figure out when we're setting this. And to me, it makes sense that when we start movement, we also want to set our is reversing. So I'm going to drag off over there and set the is reversing. And I want to set this to be false, right? If we're starting our movement and we're going positive direction, then we're not reversing. And then we can stop, but we haven't changed this. So then we start again, we continue on. But as soon as we reverse, right, we reverse our movement, we also want to set our is reversing to be true, right? We are now reversing. And then when we get to the end, and then we start movement and we go the forward direction, then we will continue and we'll set it to be we're no longer reversing and so forth. So once we do this, we have our logic set up. So we're keeping track of whether or not we're actually reversing. Now we need to determine whenever we start moving again, so whenever we resume movement, whether or not we need to go in forward or back direction. So let's make another function. And this one, we'll do another add custom event. We'll call this resume movement. This is going to be something that we can call from another script that we could do a check. So remember, if we're doing a check, we want to do a branch. We're testing a true or false, so branch. What is our condition? I want to test if is reversing is true or false. So I can hook this up just like that. Drag my is reversing in. If it's true, we want to reverse movement, right? And if it's false, we want to start movement. And all this is doing is saying whenever we call the resume movement, so we can stop and then resume, we can determine which way we want to go. And actually, right here, I'm noticing something. You see how we're calling reverse movement and we're calling start movement? I actually don't like that because it's getting a little bit confusing what it's actually doing. And up to now, it's been fine. But as we're adding more functionality, we may need to go back and double check our variable names. I think this event right here, I think makes more sense to call it forward movement. And when we want to do forward movement, we can say, okay, we're moving forward and move it forward by hitting play. And when we want to do reverse movement, then reverse, we do stop movement, we do resume movement, and then we can determine which way we want to go, either reverse movement or forward movement. So all I did was a little name change there. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to come back over here, and instead of forward movement, I actually want to call resume movement. And again, resume movement is going to determine which way we want to go. When we activate this, resume movement, in order to resume movement, we need to know whether we're reversing or not. We can check our reversing. We may also want to make sure that our default is set to false. It should automatically, but if not, make sure you compile, save, and set that to false. So the first time around, it's going to return false, which will move forward, right? And then we'll do our normal animator stuff, make sure these are set properly. And we're calling resume movement right here. Whenever we toggle it again, we should get stop movement. So if I save it, we go over here and we test. We can start, stop, start, stop. And we can wait, see what happens. And you see now that we're keeping track of our direction before we start moving again, we're making sure that we're properly keeping track of whether or not we're reversed until we hit the very end, and then we set it to the other one. So this is pretty cool. We've created a platform that we can keep track of the direction and start and stop based on an input.